You saw my real form, human explorer. Now we must bond or die by sunrise. A heavy hush blanketed the ruins of the ancient temple of Terra, thick with dust and the echoes of forgotten ages. Mason, broad-shouldered, tanned from years beneath alien suns, his hair cropped close and a jagged scar tracing his jaw, moved with practiced caution down the last corridor. His boots disturbed the powdery ash coating the flagstones, each step deliberate, every muscle primed for the threat of hidden dangers. The only sound was the low rasp of his breath in the respirator, and the faint hum of the torch clutched in his left hand. His right hovered close to the faded glyphs etched into the obsidian black walls, careful not to brush the ancient script and risk triggering the dormant defenses that had already claimed better scavengers than him. Mason slowed as the passage opened before him. He stepped into a circular chamber lined with midnight blue stone, flecked with silver that shimmered in the wavering light. At the heart of the room, suspended several feet above a dais, hung the core of Terra, a crystalline sphere, its surface webbed with glowing crimson veins, the whole structure held aloft by a shifting lattice of golden energy. The core pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, each throb pulling at Mason's mind with a magnetic, ominous allure. He paused, letting his gaze linger on the prize he'd risked so much to reach. Every instinct screamed caution. His research had warned him. The security field would only part for the genetic code of a Terran acolyte, long extinct, save for what the black market could offer. Mason slipped his pack off his shoulder and withdrew a slim vial filled with iridescent blue liquid. He uncapped it, hesitating only a heartbeat before spreading the synthesized enzyme across his palm, feeling it tingle cold against his skin. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, voice echoing hollowly. He stepped up to the dais. The energy crackled, golden filaments dancing hungrily toward his outstretched hand. Mason grit his teeth and plunged his hand into the lattice. Agony flared, pins and needles, an electric burn running up his arm, but he kept his grip steady, refusing to flinch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the energy field dissolved with a soft musical chime, vanishing in a cascade of sparks. He wrapped his fingers around the core. It was icy to the touch, yet vibrated with life, its power barely contained beneath the crystal shell. Mason cradled it against his chest, a triumphant smile tugging at his lips. The victory lasted only a second. Suddenly, the chamber was swallowed in darkness. The torch in his hand flickered out, snuffed by some unseen force, and the core's glow shrank to a dull ember. Mason's breath quickened. A cold, electric presence pressed in from every side, a vibration that seemed to thrash in his bones. The silence deepened, heavy and suffocating. Then the core blazed, erupting with crimson and gold light. In the glare, a figure materialized from the gloom, a tall, imposing silhouette, her outline inhuman and arresting. She stepped forward, revealed in the pulsing light, her body sheathed in short, deep red fur that caught the core's radiance, her amber eyes glowing like coals. Feline ears flicked atop her head, catching every sound. Her armor gleamed, molded to powerful, lithe muscles, and a long, striped tail lashed behind her, agitated. She advanced, voice low and edged with warning. "You meddle with forces you cannot control." Mason's grip on the core tightened. He forced a grin, the familiar mask he wore against danger. "Maybe," he said, lips quirking, "but I'm about to retire in style." He turned, ready to bolt, but an invisible force slammed him against the cold wall. His limbs locked in place, helpless. The feline woman's form seemed to shift, her fur bristling, her eyes blazing brighter as she drew closer. Her silhouette expanded, feline features sharpening into something both beautiful and utterly fearsome, a guardian, primal and ancient. Her words reverberated through the chamber. "You have seen me as I am human. Now you must choose. Bond with me before sunrise, or perish." The pressure released as suddenly as it had come. Mason slumped, catching his breath. Heart pounding, he studied her fierce, unyielding exterior, the flash of sorrow buried deep in her eyes. Slowly, he stepped forward, his movements deliberate. He extended his hand and, gently, brushed the edge of her pointed ear, a gesture of trust and surrender. The guardian, her name was Syrah, stared at him, amber eyes wide, stunned by his calm. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Then the temple shuddered. Stone groaned, dust raining from the high ceiling. Syrah's head snapped up. She seized Mason's arm, her grip strong and unyielding, and pulled him after her as cracks lanced across the chamber. Together they sprinted through collapsing halls, the core pressed tightly to Mason's chest, the roar of destruction at their heels. They burst through a final archway onto a windswept ridge beneath a swirling indigo sky. Mason stumbled, and Syrah steadied him with a firm hand. The ground trembled, but the immediate danger had passed. Syrah shifted, her form becoming more humanoid, her features softening. She took a steadying breath, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The dawn spire lies beyond the eastern cliffs," she said, voice measured. "We must reach it before sunrise, and seal our bond." Mason glanced at the core, then at her, forcing a crooked smile. "So, no time to find a tuxedo, huh?" Syrah's answer was grave. "This is no jest. The ritual is the only way to contain the core's power. Without it, everything here will be lost." They began their trek across the alien landscape. Mason tried to lighten the mood, tossing out quips that bounced off Syrah's clipped, practical replies. Yet when he stumbled on the loose stones, Syrah's hand shot out to steady him. When a ravine split their path, Mason unslung his grappling line and offered it, and Syrah took the lead, her movements sure and fluid. Step by cautious step, trust began to form, a fragile bridge, forged under threat of dawn. As they traversed the barren plains, the silence fractured. Sudden gunfire burst from a rocky outcrop ahead. The world snapped from tense stillness to chaos as plasma bolts seared the air, scorching the ochre ground. Syrah reacted instantly, shoving Mason behind a jagged boulder with a snarl, her red fur bristling, feline ears flattened to her skull. "Stay down!" she barked, the authority in her voice brooking no argument. Mason ducked, the core pressed tight to his chest, breath ragged as he risked a glance. Figures in bone-white armor fanned out across the ridge, their visors blank and impassive, weapons spitting death in blue-white arcs. Syrah unsheathed her twin blades with a metallic hiss. The weapons flashed in the weak daylight, catching streaks of gold from the rising sun. Without hesitation, she surged forward, a blur of red and gold. She zigzagged through the oncoming fire, her movements inhumanly fast, impossibly fluid. Plasma bolts sizzled past her, but Syrah was already inside their guard, blades singing as they met armor and bone. Mason drew his compact blaster, wedging himself against the boulder for cover. He tracked the nearest fanatic, squeezing off 2 shots. One bolt struck a soldier in the side, sending him tumbling behind a rock, while the second scorched a mark on another's chest plate, staggering him. Syrah took the opening, her blade flashing through the gap, dropping the attacker with a precise, efficient strike. The air filled with the sharp scent of scorched earth and burning ozone. The fanatics pressed their attack, shouting guttural oaths, advancing in tight formation. Mason's pulse thundered in his ears. He fired again and again, covering Syrah as she danced among them, a force of nature, fast and unstoppable. She twisted around a wild swing, kicking an armored foe so hard he crumpled. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a blade spinning into the thigh of another, then vaulted over him, reclaiming her weapon mid-air. On your right! Mason shouted, blasting another attacker creeping up on her flank. Syrah didn't pause. She spun and dispatched the foe with a brutal efficiency, then met Mason's eyes across the battlefield, her gaze burning, alive. The fanatics regrouped, forming a semicircle, their leader shouting commands in a language Mason didn't recognize. He ducked as a barrage of plasma fire forced him lower. Stones exploded around him, peppering his face with grit. Syrah leapt behind the boulder, crouched close, her chest heaving. "They're zealots," she spat, voice rough. "The Order of the Bleached Bone. They want the core for their own twisted rights." "I thought this planet was supposed to be uninhabited," Mason muttered, checking his blaster's charge. "Not anymore," Syrah replied grimly. A sudden whine cut through the cacophony, a grenade arcing through the air, spinning end over end, trailing smoke. Syrah's eyes widened. "Down!" Mason didn't think. He lunged, tackling Syrah, twisting his body over hers as the grenade detonated with a concussive roar. The blast slammed into them, the ground shuddering as a wave of heat and dust washed over. For a moment, Mason's world shrank to the ringing in his ears, the bite of gravel against his back, the weight of Syrah beneath him. When the haze cleared, he found himself pressed against her. Her fur was impossibly soft under his hands, her heartbeat thrumming against his palm. Her scent filled his senses, wild, electric, alive. Their faces were inches apart, her golden eyes wide, her breath warm on his lips. The chaos faded. The world narrowed to the space between them. Syrah's lips parted, her voice little more than a whisper. "I'm not hurt." Mason realized his hand was still splayed protectively across her ribcage. He pulled away, heat flooding his cheeks, flustered by the sudden intimacy. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Syrah pushed herself up, scanning the ridge. The attackers had retreated, regrouping, perhaps wary of Syrah's ferocity, or the unpredictable power of the core. "We have to move," she said, voice strained. Mason nodded. Together they slipped from the battlefield, ducking low and weaving between the rocks, until they reached the shelter of a cave half hidden by a veil of sparkling mineral dust. The entrance was narrow, shielded from above, and the interior plunged quickly into cool shadow. They paused just inside, catching their breath. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the distant shouts of the Bone Order. Syrah slumped against the cave wall, exhaustion lining her features. The adrenaline bled out of her, leaving her tail limp and her blades resting on her knees. Mason slid down beside her, still clutching the core, feeling the weight of the near-death encounter settle over him. "We'll be safe here, for now," Syrah murmured. She closed her eyes for a moment, chest rising and falling with each breath. Mason rose, drawn deeper into the cave by the faint glow emanating from the walls. Ancient murals, dusted in mineral light, shimmered in the gloom. He brushed his hand over the images, scenes of feline guardians standing astride swirling nebulae, their paws shaping worlds from stardust. Others depicted the same guardians, betrayed by shadowed figures, their luminous hearts torn asunder. The final image chilled him. A guardian and a human, bound by light, the human's eyes hollowed with pain, the guardian cradling the core in mourning. He stepped back, gut twisting. The truth clicked into place. Each guardian needed a human anchor. The bonding was no mystical rite, but a sacrifice. The human would become a living conduit for the core, sharing its burden for the rest of their days. Mason turned, anger flaring. "So I'm just a power source for your magic stone?" His voice echoed harshly off the cave walls. Syrah's eyes fell, her tail curling tight around her legs. She looked smaller now, vulnerable despite the armor and fangs. "If I'd told you, you would have run. There is no other way." He stared at her, rage and betrayal warring inside him. "You could have asked. You could have told me what this really meant. Her voice was barely a whisper. Would you have agreed? Would anyone? The silence stretched, raw and bitter. Mason paced, fists clenched, the core pulsing in his grip. You use people. Is that what the Guardians have always done? Find a willing idiot to burn for your cause? Syrah's ears pressed flat, eyes brimming with something like shame. We tried to protect. We failed. Now, there is only survival. The argument was fierce, pain and fear colliding in every word, the cave crackling with the energy between them. Mason's voice broke, frustration pouring out. I wanted to believe in something. Instead, I'm just fuel for your war. Syrah's breath hitched. You are more than that. You are the only one who saw me. Not just the Guardian, but Syrah. He stopped, chest heaving, the truth of her words cutting through his anger. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant wind, rattling the mineral dust at the cave mouth. Then, suddenly, Mason closed the distance between them. He grabbed her shoulders, hands trembling, and their lips crashed together in a desperate, hungry kiss. Anger and longing tangled together, everything unsaid burning between them. Syrah's claws flexed against his back, pulling him closer, her fur brushing his skin. The kiss softened, urgency fading into something quieter, a surrender neither of them had expected. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads rested together, breath mingling, the air between them charged with new understanding. Syrah's eyes shimmered in the dim light, and Mason exhaled slowly, the tension melting from his frame. For the first time since the temple, they clung to each other, not as enemies or partners of necessity, but as something more fragile, more real. In that hush, the future was uncertain, but for a fleeting moment, they simply breathed together, hearts beating in time, the core glowing softly at their side. The tension between them had changed. Gone were the easy jokes and flippant remarks, replaced by a fragile, honest closeness that lingered in every glance, every shared breath. Mason walked beside Syrah now, never ahead or behind, his hand always near hers, fingers brushing her fur when the path grew narrow. The core hung from its sling at his side, its pulse less frantic, soothed by their growing bond. They moved in silence, their steps measured. Above them, the sky shifted through shades of violet and gold, the sun's ascent reminding them that dawn, and the ritual, crept ever closer. Mason felt the core's thrum, not as a threat, but as a quiet, insistent presence, echoing the new rhythm that had formed between them. They paused for a brief rest, sheltered in the lee of a jagged stone outcropping. Syrah crouched, catching her breath, while Mason dropped beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. He set the core between them, watching as its light flickered. Then, abruptly, a surge of energy rippled outward. The boulder behind them exploded, shards flying like shrapnel. Syrah's eyes widened in alarm. Before she could react, Mason lunged, throwing himself in front of her. A sharp fragment struck his side with a sickening crunch, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. He collapsed, clutching the wound, blood welling between his fingers. Mason! Syrah was at his side in an instant, her expression stricken. She knelt over him, her hands trembling as she pressed them to the gash. Golden energy welled beneath her palms, flowing into the wound in warm waves. Mason felt the pain ebb, replaced by a tingling heat that spread through his body, her power, pure and fierce, knitting flesh and sinew together. He gazed up at her, dazed. For a moment the world narrowed to the space between them, her face inches from his, amber eyes shining with fear and hope, the wild scent of her fur filling his senses. Her touch was gentle, her concern plain. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, voice raw. Mason managed a shaky smile. "Seemed like the heroic thing to do." She huffed, a sound halfway between annoyance and relief. You could have been killed. Worth it, he murmured, if it meant keeping you safe. Syrah's cheeks darkened beneath her fur, a blush blooming as she withdrew her hands. The wound was gone, replaced by a faint golden scar. Mason flexed his side, marveling at the absence of pain. They sat in silence for a while, Syrah's hand lingering on his arm. The core's pulse was steady now, its light warm and unthreatening. As they resumed their journey, Syrah's defenses seemed to soften, the stiffness in her shoulders easing. She glanced at Mason, searching his face before she spoke. When I was first chosen as a guardian, I soared across starlit jungles, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I was proud, strong. I believed I could protect everyone. I did not understand what it meant to lose everything, my temple, my people, even my own shape. I have spent centuries hiding, wearing faces that were not mine, never daring to trust. I wanted you to see the real Syrah, but I was afraid. Mason listened, his chest tightening with empathy. He watched the way her tail curled around her leg, the flicker of pain behind her words. I get it, he said softly. Sometimes you hide so long you forget who you are. But you never stopped trying to protect what mattered. She glanced at him, eyes searching. You do not hate me for what I asked of you, for what I must ask again? He shook his head. No, I think I understand now. You were desperate, not cruel. Syrah's lips curled in the barest hint of a smile, relief mingling with gratitude. For the first time, Mason felt a fierce, protective urge, not just to survive, but to shield her from the wounds the world had dealt her. He reached for her hand, their fingers twining together as they walked on. Suddenly, a mechanical whine cut through the quiet. Above them, a sleek drone descended, its black carapace glinting in the sunlight. It hovered, then projected a wavering blue hologram onto the ground. The image resolved into the gaunt, masked visage of the fanatic leader, the one Mason had glimpsed on the battlefield, his bone-white armor etched with sigils of zealotry. The leader's voice echoed, cold and smooth. Mason Walker, you possess the core. You walk with the abomination. Listen closely. I offer you freedom, wealth beyond imagining. Passage home, your record wiped clean. All you must do is leave the Guardian behind and surrender the core. Do this, and you will be honored among us. Refuse, and you die with her. The hologram flickered, the offer hanging in the air like a blade. Syrah stood tense beside him, every muscle coiled, her tail lashing in agitation. She watched Mason, waiting for his answer, fear and resignation warring in her eyes. Mason hesitated. The promise of escape was real. He could see it in the fanatic's smug posture, the confidence of someone who believed everyone had a price. Mason's thoughts churned. He could walk away, be free, start over. But the memory of Syrah's touch, the honesty in her confession, the golden light that had healed him, these things anchored him in place. Slowly, Mason raised his blaster. He aimed, eyes never leaving Syrah's face, and fired. The drone shattered, sparks raining down as the hologram blinked out. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. He turned to Syrah, his expression resolute. He did not speak, but the message was clear. He stood with her, not because he had no choice, but because he had chosen her. For the first time, Syrah's composure faltered. A single tear glimmered in the fur beneath her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. She reached up, brushing it away, her jaw trembling. You could have left, she whispered. You could have saved yourself. Mason closed the distance between them, reaching out to take her hands in his. I'm right where I want to be. She squeezed his fingers, her claws barely grazing his skin, her gratitude shining in her golden gaze. Together, They turned toward the horizon, steps matched, united by something deeper than necessity. Whatever waited beyond the next rise, fanatics, rituals, the unknown power of the core, they would face it together, side by side, hearts and fates entwined. The dawn spire rose from the plateau, a monolith carved with swirling ancient sigils that shimmered as if lit from within. Its summit caught the first hints of sunrise, pale gold and pink streaking across the jagged stone. Mason and Sierra moved quickly, breath visible in the chill, every step weighted by the urgency of what lay ahead. The core pulsed in Mason's hands, growing hotter with every stride, as if eager for the ritual to begin. They reached the center of the spire's open crown, a circle marked by runes that flickered in time with the core. Mason paused, turning to Syrah. He studied her for a long moment, memorizing the way dawn's light played along her cheek, how her feline ears caught the breeze. He cupped her whiskered cheek in his palm. Syrah leaned into his touch, her fierce mask softening, her eyes vulnerable in the coming day. "No regrets," Mason murmured, his thumb brushing her fur. Syrah searched his face, her voice barely audible above the wind. "You still have a choice, Mason. The ritual will bind you to this world forever. There will be no going back. You will share the core's burden as long as you draw breath." He only smiled, a small, quiet thing that reached his eyes. "I've never had a real home. Maybe this is it." A breathless silence stretched between them. Syrah's lips curved into her first true smile, fragile and radiant. A gift, soft as sunrise. Mason's heart hammered, the moment suspended as if the universe itself held its breath. But the hush shattered as the distant roar of engines split the air. Enemy skimmers crested the ridge, hulls bristling with weaponry. Fanatics in bone-white armor leapt from their vehicles, plasma rifles blazing, bolts tearing sizzling paths across the spire. Stone shattered, sigils flaring as energy struck. The final battle had begun. Syrah sprang into motion, her blades drawn, eyes narrowed with focus. Mason dove for cover behind one of the spire's massive pillars, returning fire with practiced precision. He picked his targets, shots crisp and controlled, each one buying Syrah precious seconds. She moved beside him, a whirlwind of red and gold, blades flashing in the morning light. Her movements were a dance, every slash and leap a perfect blend of power and grace. Mason ducked behind a pillar as plasma fire chewed at the stone. He fired twice, dropping a fanatic who'd gotten too close. Across the battlefield, Syrah vaulted a fallen skimmer, slicing through two attackers before spinning away, tail lashing. Yet Mason could see it. She was still holding back, her full power shackled by fear and old shame, every movement a struggle between fury and restraint. He called out, voice ragged with urgency. "Syrah, don't hold back." "We're out of time." She hesitated, blade poised, amber eyes flickering with doubt. A new threat descended, an anti-grav skimmer larger than the rest, its engine screaming. The fanatic leader leapt from the prow, landing atop the spire with a heavy thud. He was tall and lean, bone-white armor painted with crimson runes, a staff crackling with blue energy clutched in his gauntleted hand. His mask hid his face, but contempt dripped from every word. "Hand over the core and your pet, and I'll be merciful," he sneered, voice amplified and cold. Mason wiped blood from his brow, lifting his head from behind cover. "She's not my pet, she's my partner." The leader's eyes narrowed and he lunged, the staff sending arcs of energy crackling through the air. Mason braced, but the blow struck him square in the chest, sending him sprawling across the sigil-carved stone. The core rolled from his grasp, spinning dangerously close to the edge. Sirah's roar tore through the chaos, a sound primal and unrestrained, echoing from the spire and down into the valley below. In that instant, Mason saw the last of her fear burn away. Sirah surged forward, her body radiating golden light, the fur along her spine blazing like fire. She grew, form expanding and shifting, armor falling away as she rose, no longer just guardian, but a feline goddess, a living avatar of power and legend. Her eyes blazed like twin suns, tail lashing as she towered over the battlefield. The ground vibrated with her presence, every sigil on the spire flaring to life in response. The core, forgotten by all but Mason, pulsed with the same golden fire. Fanatics faltered, their zeal breaking as Sirah swept through them. With every step, her power carved a path, blades becoming arcs of light that shattered weapons and armor alike. Mason, chest aching, struggled to his feet. He fired at the last pockets of resistance, covering Sirah as she cut a swath through the enemy lines. They moved together, perfectly in sync, trusting each other without hesitation. The fanatic leader snarled, raising his staff to strike again. "You are nothing, Guardian. You failed your kind once. You will fail again." Sirah's response was a wordless, thunderous growl. She leapt, claws extended, and met the leader's staff with her own power. Energy crackled between them, blue against gold, lighting the dawn with a blinding brilliance. The staff shattered, sparks cascading as Sirah's power overwhelmed it. The leader staggered, mask cracking, eyes wide with terror. With a final sweeping gesture, Sirah unleashed a wave of golden energy. The fanatics were swept aside, skimmers flipped and tumbled, weapons torn from grasping hands. The leader fell to his knees, armor smoking, as the dawn's first full rays broke over the plateau. Mason limped to Sirah's side, breath ragged, heart pounding. He watched as she stood over the defeated, her silhouette radiant against the rising sun. For a moment, she looked back at Mason, all the power and ferocity distilled into a single, searching gaze. Mason reached for her hand, grounding her, reminding her that she was not alone. The fight was over in moments. The leader crumpled and the remaining fanatics fleeing into the morning. The spire was theirs, the dawn breaking above, the core alive with promise. As the light washed over them, Mason and Sirah stood together, victorious, changed, and ready for the ritual that would bind them to each other and to this world, forever. The world was utterly still. The plateau held its breath, the silence broken only by the slow, steady pulse of the core glowing between them. A crystalline heart suspended above the carved runes of the dawn spire. The enemy was gone. The sky was awash in the gold and rose of sunrise, casting Sirah in a radiant light that made her look every inch the legend she was. Mason stood with her, battered but unbowed, the adrenaline of the battle fading, replaced by a quiet awe. Sirah faced him in her full feline majesty, towering and regal, fur aflame with dawn's colors. Her eyes, twin embers of gold, held his gaze with a fierce gentleness. She extended a clawed hand, palm open, the motion both invitation and command. Her voice, rich and resonant, echoed not only in the air but in Mason's mind, as if the ritual had already begun to bind their thoughts. "Join me. Place your hand on the core. The spire will do the rest." The words lingered, carrying weight and promise. Mason's heart pounded, not from fear but from a deep, electric anticipation. Everything he'd survived, the ruins, the battles, the betrayals and confessions, had led to this single, luminous moment. He took a breath, feeling the chill of morning fade beneath the core's gentle warmth. He stepped into the rising sun, rays painting his skin in molten gold. The core hovered, thrumming with energy that seemed to reach out, brushing his fingertips with a shiver of recognition. Mason raised his hand and, steady despite the enormity of what he was about to do, laid his palm atop the core. Syrah's paw came down over his, claws retracting so only velvet soft fur and living warmth pressed against his skin. For an instant, nothing happened. Then the world shattered into light. A storm of radiance exploded around them, bright as a supernova and gentle as a heartbeat. The spire's sigils surged, beams of energy racing along the runes and spiraling upward. Mason felt his body dissolve into sensation, weightless and boundless. He could feel Syrah, her presence fierce and wild and impossibly vast, her spirit wrapping around his own. Their minds touched, tangled, merged. It was like falling and flying, like being seen for the first time and seeing the universe anew. Memories flooded him, not just his own, but Syrah's. Endless jungles beneath alien moons, the laughter of cubs, the agony of loss, the ache of centuries spent in exile and hope. He saw the first dawn on this world, felt the joy of creation, the pride of guardianship, the grief of betrayal. He understood her loneliness, her longing for connection, the burden she had carried through ages unnumbered. Through her eyes, he saw beauty and terror, hope and sorrow, all braided together in the endless dance of life. And she saw him, his doubts and courage, his battered heart, the hard-won humor that had protected him for so long. She saw his hunger for belonging, the way he had chosen her not out of duty, but of love, and she welcomed him in. The guardianship settled over Mason, not as a cage, but as a promise. He felt the core's energy wind into his soul, not draining him, but making him more, amplifying his senses, filling him with purpose. He could sense the land beneath his feet, the pulse of life across the plateau, the ancient harmony of guardian and world. Syrah was with him, their essences entwined, neither diminished, but both made whole. Slowly, the radiance faded. Mason blinked, vision clearing, and found himself standing in the circle of runes, the core now floating serenely between his and Syrah's joined hands. The spires glowed dim to a quiet shimmer, and the golden light of dawn fell softly across them. Syrah shifted, her form shrinking, her fur melting into smooth skin, her eyes still aglow but her features now more human, more open. The sorrow that had shadowed her for so long was gone, replaced by a luminous peace. She gazed at Mason, lips curving in a smile more real and radiant than any he had seen from her before, a smile that made every risk, every pain, worthwhile. "How do you feel?" she asked softly, her voice trembling on the edge of laughter and tears. Mason looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. The thrum of cosmic energy danced through his veins, heady and exhilarating. He grinned, the joy bubbling up from some deep, new well inside him. "Like I finally belong somewhere." The words rang true, reverberating in his chest and, he could feel it, in hers as well. She laughed, a low musical sound, and stepped closer. The core hovered between them, a quiet witness to their union. Mason wrapped his arms around Syrah, pulling her in. She melted against him, her head settling on his shoulder, their bodies fitting together as if they had always been meant for this. The warmth of her seeped into him, the bond now unbreakable. Outside, the world stirred, the wind in the grass, the distant calls of waking creatures, the hush of a planet safe for another dawn. The ritual was complete. The core was safe. The guardianship was shared, not as a burden, but as a promise to each other and to the world they would now protect together. Embraced by sunlight and by each other, Mason and Syrah stood in the heart of the dawn spire, knowing at last they were home. The aftermath was peaceful. The world seemed to exhale as the sun climbed higher, rays washing the plateau in honeyed gold. The core, once a harbinger of calamity, floated between the carved stones of the dawn spire, its glow no longer fierce or desperate. It pulsed with a gentle vitality, radiating life that spread through the land, a source of renewal, not destruction. Grass glimmered where scorched earth had been, and tiny, iridescent blooms unfurled in the light, their petals trembling with new promise. Syrah and Mason stood at the edge of the spire, hands entwined, the silence between them rich with the weight of all they had endured. Syrah leaned into him, her golden eyes soft, her face unshadowed at last. The lines of ancient sorrow and old fear had faded. What remained was the quiet confidence of someone who had found her place in the universe. Mason turned to her, his hand tracing a gentle line along her cheek, marveling at the warmth in her gaze, the freedom in her smile. "You're different," he murmured, voice hushed as if afraid to shatter the stillness. Syrah's lips curved in a teasing smile. "I could say the same for you, Guardian Walker." He laughed, the sound bright and easy echoing against the stones. "So that's me now? Officially?" She squeezed his hand, the tip of her tail flicking in amusement. "There is no one more fitting." Mason drew her closer, his other arm circling her waist. He dipped his head, pressing a kiss to her brow, then to her lips. A kiss not of desperation or relief, but of certainty. The connection between them hummed, the core's energy a low thrum beneath their skin. This kiss was a promise, an affirmation. Two equals, two hearts finally unburdened, choosing each other with clear eyes. Syrah melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair. Her purr vibrated against his chest. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his, breath mingling, contentment blooming between them. "I never thought I would have this," she confessed quietly. "Not after so long." Mason searched her eyes, his own voice rough with feeling. "Me neither. I spent my life running, from everything, especially from belonging. But now we belong," Syrah finished, her words a gentle decree. They stood that way for a long moment, letting the truth settle over them like sunlight. Around them, the world was changing. The plateau teemed with new life, winged creatures swooping overhead, rivers of crystal water winding across the grass, trees lifting emerald branches skyward. The core's healing energy swept outward, restoring what had been lost and mending what had been broken. Far below, the surviving fanatics had vanished, leaving only the hush of renewal in their wake. Mason looked out over the alien landscape, his arm still tight around Syrah's shoulders. He could sense the world in ways he never had before. Its pulse, its aches and joys, the slow dance of growth and decay. Through their bond, he felt Syrah's joy, her hope, her fierce determination to safeguard this place, not because she must, but because she wanted to, because they wanted to, together. Syrah's voice was soft, threaded with awe. "The core is at peace. For the first time in centuries, it feels safe." Mason turned to her, a lopsided smile on his lips. "Guess we make a good team after all." She arched an elegant brow, the old mischief back in her eyes. "You doubted?" He laughed again, pulling her close. "Never." "Well, maybe a little. You did try to kill me when we met." She shrugged, mock serious. "You did steal the core." "Details," he countered, grinning. Their banter was easy now, comfortable, a far cry from the wary tension of their first encounter. The love between them was no longer a secret or a desperate accident. It was a choice, deliberate and fierce, a shared journey that would stretch across lifetimes. The story would be told and retold, of the human who looked past fear and legend and chose the heart of the guardian, and of the guardian who found her freedom, not through solitude or duty, but through love. Already, the wind seemed to whisper it, a new legend rising with the sun. Syrah brushed her thumb over Mason's knuckles, her touch reverent. "What happens now?" she asked, the question as much for herself as for him. He thought for a moment, surveying the reborn horizon. "We protect this place. We build something new, and we do it together." She smiled, and this time there was nothing fragile in it, only radiance, only certainty. "Together," she echoed, sealing the promise. They watched as the light swept across the plains, the core's glow mirrored in the world it had saved. The future stretched before them, vast and wild and unknown, but they faced it not as guardian and outsider, not as myth and intruder, but as partners. Their hearts beat in unison, the bond forged not by duty or sacrifice, but by the fierce, enduring love they had chosen. Syrah leaned in, her lips brushing his once more, and Mason kissed her back. A kiss that tasted of dawn, of hope, of forever. Hand in hand, they stood at the edge of all that was to come, ready to face whatever the universe would bring, bound not by fate, but by the love they had found and the legend they would now live together. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.